Okay. All right. So everyone, welcome again. And this is our Python class. So one of the things I had shown us before I moved into recording this is you go click your whatchamacallit now. You go click your Anaconda. You open up your Anaconda. I'm actually looking for the Anaconda I had open just now. If I can't find it, don't worry. Let me completely. Well, once you open your Anaconda, you open your Anaconda, you go in there, and then you find one of the things you will find is, yeah, you open your Anaconda. One of the things you are going to find is JupterLab. And once you click your JupterLab is going to get you here, right? Once you get here, to your left is you see a bunch of folders, right? And this bunch of folders, what I had told everyone in the class to do before now was to go into whatchamacallit now, my documents, go to my documents and create a folder where you want to work from, right? And we did create something and we put everything in the documents, right? So I've also put my stuff in documents, and this is my arrow with documents. You come in here to document, find the folder. This is the folder I am working with, which is Python programming course. For some of you, it's Python or Siri. So you go click it. As you click it, you'll be directed to where you have all of your content, right? So that's what I have here. So I just started working with this yesterday. So the file that you're going to be working with, what you do is you go double click and then that file opens. This is week one. If I want to do week 1B, I can double click and week 1B opens. And this is a different tab. So you can hop from one tab to the other. So, and you will see the bright one is the one that you're working on, which is one. This is the one I'm working on right now. And this is where we're going to start. So obviously we're working on Python. Python is a programming language that is used to do all sorts of things. And because we're in a data science class, right? Data is one of those things, right? Where Python is a category king. Actually, the two most prominent programming applications for data science are Python and R. So, and that's why we're focusing on Python. Now, for those of you still very interested in data science and all things data science, maybe at some point, if I can find some time, I would walk you through the process of installing R and then just doing a quick run through R. So you can always program in R if you want to do that. So that is it. So Python is very easy to learn, which is one of the reasons why it has become very ubiquitous. A lot of people, not just developers, other people, engineers and regular folks use Python to do a lot of the work they need to do. Python, of course, has certain inefficiencies, right? But those are inefficiencies are things that are probably not as relevant to you as much as they are relevant to developers. Maybe if you grow into becoming a developer one day, you might now begin to compare applications. So the objective for us right now is to understand Python, some of the Python syntax and variables. You can see the learning objectives there. Understand how to use inputs and print functions, create and manipulate a couple of strings, um, and complete a mini project, right? Which is a personalized greeter app. And some other things I didn't include here is I want us to understand different types of data types, right? If some of these things are sounding, unusual to you, that's fine. You're going to figure it out as we go. So don't fret about anything you don't understand because I'm probably going to mention it a gazillion times, either today or in subsequent classes. And over time, you're going to grasp it. Now, this is there's something we call in programming the hello world of programming, which is the first time you program. you want to say hello world, right? And in Python, the way we say hello world is by, you know, notice what's happened here. You just wrote print, and then you create a parenthesis, right? And then you can put any string there. And in this case, we put hello world, right? And then you close the parenthesis. Now, notice we have two hello worlds there, right? The first was written for us, and the second we wrote ourselves, right? If I print, it's going to print both of those. So this is welcome to Python. So that's your first ever code that you have written. So again, remember to run all of this, like I mentioned, for those of you that were in the last class, what we have here is a cell, right? This is a cell, and you can create as many cells as you want. All you need to do to create a new cell is click, you see, insert a cell below. You click it, another cell can come here, and you can do whatever you want to do with that cell. Click another cell can come. But I don't need these cells, so I'm just going to delete. See where I'm deleting the cell from, and I'm also deleting this cell. Be careful when you're deleting cells because you might delete something that is relevant, right? But the link that I put in the chat, you can save that link so that anytime you mess up a folder, you can always go download, or else just create two folders and have one as your working folder. So why I like JupyterLab is that you can play around with anything. If you can test your own code, you can do all kinds of things. So the first thing we've been able to do is what we call the print method, right? Which is what I have highlighted here. You've been able to use a print method to print anything. So I can print all kinds of things, right? I can say print open and close, which is a parenthesis, and then I can write anything. And I'm going to tell you what all of these things, I'm going to break every one of them down eventually. I open and close brackets, and then I can write whatever I like, right? You know, the United States is on the march, right? And I can run that, boom, it prints out that stuff for me. So it printed out two because you have one here and you have one here. So that's essentially how the print method works, right? That's an example. So the next thing you want to know when you do Python programming is data types, right? We're going to touch a bit on variables and then data types, right? I probably will want to break this up. Let's have two different topics. But you see what's happening here? So to the point I made earlier, because I want to make sure everybody grabs it. When I clicked this plus sign. That's how I got a new cell. Now, this cell, right, can do a couple of things. Two of the most important things is you can use it to code. You can see the arrow here. You can either use it to code or you can use it for what we call a markdown. A markdown is just creating text. Some of you are familiar with HTML, right? Markdown is almost like HTML where you can create text, right? So you can either run your code or you can do your markdown. If you're in the code mode, all it can do is run actual codes. If you want to put text, you want to put pictures, you want to put all kinds of things, right, that are not code, you use this drop down, the markdown drop down. So if you click inside the cell, it will tell you where the cell is. But for this cell, I want to put in text, right? All I need to do is I'll come here and I'll click markdown. All of a sudden it changes to markdown. Notice as I click inside this, right, what I have here is markdown, right? So I could go ahead and say, let me just type anything, right? Um, I'll say chapter 1, right? And then I say enter. Let me have two hashes, right? Uh, I will say section, sorry, section 1, right? And then I can come in and say three hashes, section 2. And I can come in and say four hashes, section 3, right? or I can say sub subsection 1.1, and then I'll say sub subsection 1.1.1, right? And then I could come here and I'll just go copy anything I can find somewhere and just populate. Uncle Trump just sends tariff letters, right? He's giving them a couple of people asking them to pay up tariffs. I come in here, I go back here, and then I paste a couple of things that article says, right? I have all of this. Remember, I'm in Markdown, right? If I click this right now, this is what I've created. That's the whole purpose of your cells. Let's say when I do that, I want to also, I can create another cell, right? Let's say you're writing a paper. And let me just go here and say uh, graphs. Let me just go look for graph in Python. Let me go look for some graph. Um, Graph plotting. Okay, let me come here. So look at this code. This code here, I can just come copy it. I copy this code, and then let me come here, and then I would type this here, right? Remember, I'm in code now, not Markdown. I can try to run this code and see what it gives me. See, it's created this graph. So I'm writing this whole chapter, and I have all of this going on. That's the reason why we use, and I can come here and manipulate all kinds of things, change things around, do all kinds of things, and so let's say I change this to 10, change this to 30, 33, and I run it again, and I'll have completely different outcomes. And then I'm like, okay, let's make it this, blah, blah, blah. 44, I don't know what I'm gonna get, but I'm getting different things, and I'm like, let's make it 28, boom. You know, I can do all kinds of things, right? That's all I'm doing. But then, because I'm teaching this class and I don't want to deal with all of this, I can completely delete this cell, delete the graph I just borrowed from online, and then I'm back to where we were before, right? So our first code and then our variables. But I don't think this is very representative of what I want to say, because data types will come after variables. So let me double click. Let me remove data types and let me just go. Notice I put two hashes here, right? So I just have variables. This is where this will start, right? And I type in here. If I run this right now, I'm going to get an error. Why? Because I'm in code, right? So let me run it. You see, it says an invalid syntax. So let me still come in here and put my double hash and run it again, and you will see error code. So why there is no error, I'll tell you why there is no error here, right? And the reason why there is no error, whenever you want to type comments, right, and you use a hash, right, the system, it comments out that particular thing. The system doesn't see it. That's why you have this. But if I want the words to come back, all I need to do is I would go here, say Markdown, and then all of a sudden you see the color changes, boom. And then we're talking about different kinds of data types, right? So let me say I'm in Google right now. What are data types in Python? You know, I don't want to plagiarize, but I want to get some idea of what's going on. And this is coming from um, Greeks for Greeks. I just come here. I could come here and, you know, that way I click here and I go here. Oops, sorry. And I paste and I read it up, and then data types in Python are classifications that determine the type of value a variable can hold and what operations can be performed on it, right? The main built-in data types include numeric types. So there are different kinds of data types. So I have numeric types, right? Let me just bring numeric types. Numeric types. This is numeric types, which are int, float, complex, and then sequential types, yeah, which are this. So I will say sequential types, which are this, and mapping types, right, which are dicts. And we're going to talk about all of these things I'm bringing out here, right? Mapping types. And then what else do we have going on? Mapping types and then Boolean type, bool, yeah. And like this is capital B and set types, right? And then boom, yeah. So data types are mm, values, different types of values that can be assigned to variables. Don't worry, I haven't talked about some examples of data types include, right? And then I come in here, I'm like, okay, let's do this. I say something like this, right? I can come in here and I put this star, right? Star, star, and I put another star. Now, remember, all of this, right, is not my content. So I don't want to plagiarize, but I've gotten the information I need and I delete it, right? So I go ahead and then I can run this. And this is what I have. So that's how I got to where, all of what I'm doing right now. Now, it's not organized in the order in which I did all of this. So as you can see here, this is sequence types, right? That is str. This is an example of sequence type, you know. So let me come here. That's a sequence type. One of the sequence types is str. So strings, right? They are short for str. That's what strings are. And I'm going to tell us what strings are, right? Integers, int, that's integers. We're going to talk about all of this, right? And these things are things you're already familiar with. Once I start saying it, you would know what I'm talking about. And you can see floats. Yeah, these are floats, you know, short for floats. These are all things you're already familiar with. So eventually I'm going to make some notes around all of this. I just started developing this a couple of hours ago, but I just want you to get familiar and understand. But for now, any questions? Does anyone have any questions? Can you show us how to create the folder in Jupyter Notebook for importing purposes, please? So administrator, so you don't have to create any folder in Jupyter Notebook. Just go into your My Document, right, and just create a folder normally, the normal way you would create a folder if you were just trying to create a folder in your computer, and then download the folder that we have there, right, in the link, and put that folder or the content of that folder into the folder you created. Or another way to do it is just go to Google Drive, use the link that I put in there, download that folder. It's going to download compressed, uncompress it and copy that folder and put it in your my document. And then open Jupyter Notebook. Once you open Jupyter Notebook, go to Documents, click Documents, and then find that folder, double click it. As you open it, you're going to see all of the files inside that folder. Try it and see if it doesn't work for you, just let me know. I would assist you. Okay. So like I mentioned, we've done the hello world, which is the hello world. Then the second thing is variables, right? So for example, if I say x is equals to 2, every one of us did a bit of algebra or something in school, right? If I say x is equals to 2, right? That is kind of like the x is a variable, right? So the x is a variable. Though the concepts are not exactly the same thing, in programming, right? When I say x is equals to 2, all I'm saying is there is a box, you know, um, let me see if I can find something online. Variables in Python. And when you are learning, you know, the internet is a very good resource, right? So Le- yeah, I'm trying to show you something. Yeah. Okay, let me look. Let me type something else. Index. Indexing. Indexing in Python. Okay, this is more or less what I was trying to I'm trying to show, right? So you see, when you are assigning when you are assigning x, let's say, let me just close this. When I say x is equals to y is equals to 2, for example, right? What's happening is I am just pointing, I'm assigning, I'm assigning. So just hold on. So if I say y is equals to 2, right? In reality, it's actually something like y equals to 2. Does this make sense? Which means, let's say I have a box, right? And I'm pointing to that box. I'm just saying that that y is because y doesn't, what I'm trying to disabuse your mind from is that y is equals to 2 because y is not equal to 2 as it were. It just says that I'm assigning y to be 2. You would understand this much better because so in programming, double equal to is what says that y is equivalent to 2, right? In everyday math, y is equals to 2 means that y is equivalent to 2. But in programming, it just says that y, right, is assigned to 2. I can reassign y if I say y is equals to 2, right? I can just come in here and say y is equals to 3 again, and all of a sudden y becomes 3 instead of being 2. So the latest value is what it will just be. So, and I'll show you with an example. And like I mentioned, if I say something and you don't understand it, don't worry. We are going to come back to it. We are going to come back to it because you're going to hear it many times over. So if I say, okay, notice this, right? And I say y is equals to 2, right? And I print this, right? I will get 2. If I change here and I say y is equals to 100 and I run it again, guess what? It's now 100. What happened to the 2? The 2 is still there. But what is happening here is um, one way to think about it is, let's say there is a house on a street, right? You have a couple of apartments on a street, right? When I assign someone, if I assign Y to the first apartment, right? Room number a room in the apartment, say room number one, y is equals to one at that point. It doesn't mean that y, say yourself that is going into that room is the same thing with the room. The only thing it's saying is that the room has been assigned to you. That's all it means. So it was assigned to, two. Actually, look at the way you look at it, right? Look at it this way. I think it will help with understanding. It's just saying that two has been assigned to Y. Assume that two is a room, right? Two has been assigned to one. But all of a sudden, you can reassign, remove two from there and say, okay, we are bringing in something new, someone new to take the room. 100 is the one taking the room right now. So if I now go check who is in this room, all of a sudden I realize it is 100 that is in the room. So that's why it's actually called variable, because I can easily change who is in that room anytime I want. So that's essentially what a variable is, right? Think of it every time you think of about variable, think of it like a room that anybody can be assigned to. I think I finally hit on it. Yeah. Think of it as a room anybody can be assigned to. That's what a variable is, right? And I can always go change who the occupant of that room is. And the difference I was trying to explain, which is I did in a very long-winded way, was that just because I'm assigned to a room does not mean I am equal to that room. I have just been pointed to that room. Okay, now, did I lose anyone there? No? Yes? Okay, so now we have started with our variable. Now, what I'm saying is in this case, right, there is somebody called Alice. I am assigning Alice, right, to something called name. Right? So we are moving instead of from left to right, we are moving from right to left. I'm appointing a list to something called a variable called name. I can decide to change who I'm assigning it to and assign it to someone else. But right now, the person that stays in that room is called Alice. And there is an age that is 16, right? That's 16. I'm assigning the age 16, height, and all of that. So these are all variables, one variable, two variable, three variable, four variable. And if you look at it, it's kind of telling a story, right? About somebody called Alice that's 16 years old, that's whose height is 1.6.5. And we're trying to figure out if the person is a student. And then they're like, yes, the person is a student, right? So, and then I say print, and then I open. We already did print, if you remember. And then I can assign each of these variables, right? I'm like name, comma, age, comma, height, comma, is student, comma. And then if I run it right, it's just going to go, all it's doing is what is assigned to name, it will bring it out, which is Alice. What is assigned to age, it will bring it out, which is 16. What is assigned to height, blah, blah, blah. And you bring all of this out. So that's essentially what a variable is. It's something to which you can assign. It's a space, specific space in your computer storage area where you can assign values. And you can only have one value, right, in that space per time. The other thing is that we're going to be talking about different types of data types. You can assign to that space any kind of different kinds of data types. So all of these data types that you see here are different data types, right? Alice is a data type called a string. And I'm going to explain all of that. Don't get winded about it. And then there's another data type here, right? That is called an integer. We are all used to integers, right? An integer is any whole number, right? That's what an integer is. A string is any text. And I'm going to talk about that a little bit more. And then you have 160.5, which is like a decimal place. So it's not a whole number. So this is what we call, so remember I said we can comment something I don't want the computer to see. I use a hash. So I use a hash, right? And I say this is float, right? This is a float. Something like this is an integer. And I'll say integer, right? And then for this, it's a string, right? And then this is what we call a Boolean. A Boolean is just true or false. If something you're trying to test something, whether it's true or false, that's what a Boolean is, right? Boolean. And all of these things are important because when you start your actual coding, you need to use different kinds of, and remember, we talked about the data type, right? Is something that can be assigned to a variable. And we said there are different kinds of data types, and I've just mentioned the different kinds of data types. And all these data types, right, behave in completely different ways. The next steps we are going to go into will be now walking you through what those data types are and how they behave. Maybe the first time it might be a little strange and uncomfortable to you, but after some time, you're going to get super comfortable with these things. So there are different kinds of data types. I didn't necessarily capture all of them, but I'm going to show you some of the most common types of data types. So the first one is a string. What is a string? So let's start in the English language, for example, and in most languages, right? If you're trying to teach someone ABC, you start with what we call a character, right? Character. So something like um, A, B, C. These are all characters, right? So, after you've taught a child the characters, right? And normally, just like you have string, str, right? Character is a type of data type, and it's usually characterized by char in programming. In most programming languages, that's how you capture this data type, right? We call it char. So in English, so that's why I'm like, it's not something esoterical, it's something you already know because in your everyday, like in languages, irrespective of the language you're using, right now we're using English, right? Where you start from is you start with a character, and that's a type of data type, right? So the next type of data type you have is what we call a string. So, right? String, and which we call str. Now, the thing about a string is when you have taught a child A, B, C, D, blah, 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 then you begin to concatenate some of these words. In other words, begin to put them together. So you can tell a child CAR is car, car. Now it's no longer a character, it's now what we call a string. So CAR is a string. If I say BA is a string. If I come up with a word, I don't know what the longest word is. Um, if I say something like this, right? And I can even increase any number of words together, right? Blah, blah, blah. And I'm writing all of this. And then this is also a string. So it doesn't matter how long. So if it's one letter, it's a character. If it is multiple letters, it's a string. Now, if I have a number like 25, it's 25 is not a string because it's not a combination of more than one number, right? So a string is now what 45, for example, is what we go ahead to call an integer. So this is all I'm trying to explain what's going on here. So another thing you're going to find out about a string, right, is that a string, you always need to put it in parentheses. Sorry, in what do you call it? In um, you have to, is it hyphenate? What's no, it's not hyphenate. What's the word? Like somebody help me. I'm experiencing a brain freeze, right?
Parentheses.
Ah,
Quotation.
thank you, my brother. So you always want to put a string in quotation. So you can either use a single quotation or a double quotation. That's what makes it a string in programming. And what you're learning here, it doesn't matter what language you're going to be coding with, you're going to be doing the same thing. right? So that's what we have. So today we've learned character. For anything character, you have to put a string, a quotation over it. Anything string. String is just more than one character together. That's what a string is, right? If I write, even if I write a sentence, right? Like I said, let's assume all of this is somebody's name, is a mighty warrior, right? That's also all a string because it's more than one character concatenated together, right? That's what you call a string. So I hope that helps drive the point of what a string is. Um, so the next thing I'm going to do, so as you can see here, I commented this out. It says strings, right? What they do is actually they store text. That's what a string does. So you can see it's something you already know. It's just that it's not a familiar language. So an example of a string is, so greeting here is a variable, and I say hello world, and I assign hello world to greeting. Let's say greeting is actually a box, right? All I'm doing is I'm putting hello world into that box, and that variable is just a space in my computer hard drive or my sorry processor or whatever, somewhere in my computer. I'm just assigning it. So quote, this is another string. This is another string and all of that, right? So for example, one of the things I can do is I can decide to print out this, right? And notice the variable, right, does not have a quotation mark over it because it's a variable, it's not a string, right? If you have a bunch of text, right, that do not have quotation over them, right, then that thing is a variable, it's not a string, right? So if I want to print out greeting, right? What I'm going to print out, all I'm just doing is I am saying, I'm asking the print method, go into this box called greeting and bring out whatever is inside it. If I want to print quotes, I'm telling this method print, go into a box called quotes and bring out anything that is inside it, right? That's what's going on here. So each of them, so I can run this, boom, and it gives me all of those things that are there, right? So that's what's going on here. So we are done with strings right now. The next thing we are going into is integers. And if it doesn't feel like this is what you thought you were going to see, it's okay. This is just us. It's like trying to learn a new language, but you kind of want to start with learning the ABC and a bit of the language syntax, the structure, and all of that, which is fine. Once you get through all of this, notice that we started with characters and then we went into strings. Now we're bringing in the numbers. Eventually, when you have all of these data types together, you can now begin to put them together in like we do in English, and you begin to speak languages, you begin to speak the language, right? So we are putting together all the building blocks of the programming language. So the next thing we have right now is the integer. What is the integer? Like I mentioned before, integers are whole numbers. So any whole number that you are ever gonna have. So if I write 1,000, right, that's an integer, and I say one is an integer, and I say and I come up with a word. I don't know how many, whether it's a pentallion or whatever, it's also an integer. But if I say something like 23.45, now that's not an integer because an integer is a whole number. So anything that's a whole number is an integer. So, and we have a variable and we are assigning it to an integer, right? Sorry, this is an integer and we're assigning it to this variable. This, always think of it in terms of you're moving from your left to your right, right? You're putting this into the variable. Temperature, you notice temperature is -3, right? Even though it has a negative sign, it's still a whole number, so it's considered an integer. So here I want to print out the integers, right? But notice another thing, right? I can actually try to find out what type of integer there is here, right? And I run, say something like this. You see, what it tells me is I've printed out the score, the year, and the temperature, which is 85, 25, and -3. And by the way, it's telling me that score, which is this, is an integer, int. So it's a class called integer. Make sense? So let me type something else. Let's say I say name, and I say something like equal to, and I put Anselm, right? And I tell it to print, and I say, okay, let's go ahead and also print name, right? We're asking it to tell us what type name is, right? And you run this. Guess what? It's telling us it's an str, which is a string. Does that make sense now? You know, so let me put another thing here and let me say pressure, right? And I say equal to 23.4567891, right? And then I say, okay, let me find out what type it is, right? And I come in here and I say pressure. Guess what it tells me? Oh no, this is double S, sorry. See, that's what happens, right? I chose this variable, is double single S here, and I put double S here. That's why it's giving me the error. It says name, this name, right? Pressure is not defined because I'm asking it to go into a box that it does not know anything about. So I'm going to correct it now so that it actually knows, this and this are the same thing. So if I ask it to go into a box, it goes into that room and it finds that this box exists. And I run it, right? And all of a sudden it's telling me it's a float. Why is it a float? Because it's not an integer. It has decimal points attached to it. That's why it's showing me. So I can actually try to find out what kind of type it is. So that's what we call data types, right? So I'm going to remove all of this to avoid any confusions, but I just wanted to show. So the next thing, which we already alluded to, is the issue of floats, right? Now we have floats. Floats, right? Floats are decimal numbers. So price is equals to this. So I'm assigning 19.99 to price, 3.7. All of these, because they are decimal places, I can call them up and then I can ask what type of type they are. Boom. And that's what a float is. So let's go over it again. So a character, right, is just a letter, one letter, right? And then we have a string, which is a concatenation of multiple characters, right? An integer is simply a whole number, on the number line, anywhere from negative infinity to positive infinity, right? And then the next thing we have is floats. Float is essentially any decimal number, right? Negative, positive, it doesn't matter, but provided it's a negative, it's a decimal number, that's what we call float. And then Boolean is what I just mentioned, is either when you're trying to test a proposition, whether something is true or false, that's what you call a Boolean. So you say Booleans hold the true or false value. So sometimes you might be writing a code. There are certain things that are not on the continuous line. It's either going to be 0 or 1, yes or no. That's where you use Booleans, right? And this is an example. Something like is you're trying to test if something is logged in. And again, for integers, you can use anything. Like you can use anything. There's no particular, even though there are certain rules around how you choose what do you call it? A variable name, but essentially whatever you put here is going to work, right? So we're asking a question almost like is logged in true, has permission false, right? So, and I print all of this. If I print this, it will just bring out what we have is logged in, right? Is logged in false, print type logged in is logged in true. Boolean hold true or false. Yeah, is logged in, has permission. Yeah, and I'm going to talk about this a little bit, right? Um, Let me see. Probably it should be in the second. We'll talk about a couple of other things, but any questions though? Does anyone have questions?
I
None for now.
think I should. Oh, just a minute. Go back to the bullying.
Yeah.
Okay. Where is it now? You had print is logged in. comma has permission.
Yeah.
What does it, so what comes out as the result of that command?
Two
Because I
things.
couldn't see it anywhere. I
No,
couldn't see.
look at it here. It's true and
Oh, true
false.
and false. Okay,
Because we
I've
have
seen.
two things. It's logged
Okay,
in, has permission.
okay,
Yeah, it's just, yeah. And then it's
okay. I
testing
think
for what class they are. Because
the
both of
type.
them have the same
Yeah,
class, it gave us bool, right?
it's logged in. Okay,
Yep.
that's
Yeah.
fine.
Yeah. So when I was doing that, I now remember some other thing that I also need to. I don't know whether I included it in this, but a couple of things. I mean, so it's just like you're learning any language, right? There are a couple of rules in those languages, and that those are the things we are trying to go through right now. But once we get through all of those rules, we will now begin to use them to actually solve problems, right? Yeah, but if not for anything, right? One of the things I hope I have established today is how Jupyter Notebook um, works, and gradually you're beginning to see how to read codes, right? Because eventually, most of what you're going to do is not necessarily creating code. It will just be being able to read all code that other people have written, or in some cases modify them. So by the time we've gone through all of this over a couple of iterations, you're going to get kind of comfortable with it. Well, we've already done this, right? Where you can use type to test different kinds of types, right? Which we already did, right? So notice print type name, print type age. So what is happening is, and you didn't see any of these things here. What is happening is, if you have any variable defined anywhere at the top, right, you can use it later in the program. So all of this, right, it's actually going to go pick up, where do we have name, blah, blah, blah. Name is somewhere at the top here, right? It's going to go pick all of that information to all of a sudden print here. So another one is, you can also um, convert certain uh, types, convert something from one type to another type, right? Remember that 42, right, is an integer, right? 42 is an integer. But guess what? If I want to convert 42 into a string, I can do that. And the only way I do it is just by putting quotation marks around it, and all of a sudden it will become a string. Now, if you put quotation marks around it, right, it changes in character. You can't add it like 1 + 1 anymore, because the computer doesn't see it as a string. It will throw up an error. So uh, that's how you um, convert a type, one type to another. So, and this is another example, right? And let's say I want to convert the 42, which I have converted to a string. I want to convert it back to an integer. This is what I have to do, right? I'll just say int, and then I would type it in there. Remember, what we have here is essentially this. And then that's how you get it back again. Or I want to convert that string, which is this 42, into a float. I can also do that by just typing float and then putting it in parentheses. So if I run this right now, right, you can see the journey that it's going through, right? First of all, it prints num, which is what we have here, right? It's just 42. It gives you the 42. But then we try to test to find out what kind of type is num str. We find out it's a string, right? Not an integer. When we try to convert it back into an integer, we try here again, and then it gives us back an integer. This is going to be relevant at some point, right? Because there are certain times when you don't want the computer to see something as a string or as an integer, and that's why you do actually these conversions. And now look at the 42, you're converting it to a float. Remember, a float has to be a decimal number. So it converts 42 into a float, which is 42.0. 42 and 42 are the same thing, but it has to see it as a decimal number. So the other type of thing you're going to stumble upon, let me, this is supposed to be 5. The other thing you're going to stumble upon is a method, right? Called, so when you see a lot of, um, when you see a lot of words, right, that have these open and close brackets, in the most part, they are what we call methods. Later in the process of teaching you Python, I'm going to show you what a method is and how you create a method and all of that. But it's important to know that this is a method. Now, notice if you look at this, right, there's something you will keep seeing all over the place. Notice that some numbers are like green, light green. Why are they light green? Notice some are red and then all of a sudden some are light green. You see, all of these are light green. They are what we call reserved numbers, right? Reserved words. What are reserved words, right? Um, uh, so in programming, there's something called abstraction, and let me explain what abstraction means, right? So some of you are not mechanical engineers, you're not mechanics or anything, right? Somebody designs a car, you buy the car. All you do is just come, open your car, get into the car, turn on the engine, and the engine starts, right? And then you pedal down, and the car begins to move, and you want to stop it. You pedal the brakes, and all of a sudden the car stops. Now, everything that is going on in that car, the horsepower it brings, the brakes and everything are not inside the car. They are somewhere else in the engine. If your car is really old and you go open that engine, it's probably spewing water and all of that, but you don't experience it inside your car. All of that is going on somewhere else, right? So what you have done in that case, right, the designers of the car is that they have abstracted. In other words, they have hidden how things work somewhere, right? The only access they give to you is just the pedals that you pedal down and you pedal up and then you change your gear and all of that. That's all that's it's going on there, right? So when you see things like these reserved words, right, what's happening is they are like your pedals and they are like your brakes and they are like your gear. The actual code, right, which I will call functions that are driving those words are somewhere behind. The first example is when we had print, right? You just type print and all of a sudden it prints out something. It just doesn't happen. It happens because there is a code that has been written inside the program, right? That tells it exactly what to do. So that's why print, for example, is a method, right? So there are a couple of reserved words, right, in Python. So let me just go. I didn't include that in my notes, but let me just go here and check. Reserved words in Python, right? These are reserved words in Python. So look at the reserved words in Python, right? Or let me go use another, I don't know, somewhere where it will be clearer. So these are all reserved words. And here it tells you exactly what each of those words do. There are not so many of them, but they are. Like one of them is and, as, assert, break, class, continue, def, blah, blah, blah. These are all reserved words. There are other words, right, that are just reserved, right? And then beside the reserved words, right, you also have the functions that I mentioned, like print, a couple of other ones. But now what that means is because they are reserved words or Python keywords, you can't use them. If you use them, you run into some kind of error because like it's literally like you're driving into a venue and the venue owners have put a cone in the driving space. You can't park here, right? That's what those words are. And those words are very important. And then in most programming languages, when you get in there, you see them with completely different colors, right? In some of the cases, right? So whenever you see a pattern of colors, you just pay attention. Like here in this particular case, you notice all the strings have red, kind of. Is it red or something, or dative brown or something? But it's just what it is, right? And then here the variables are black, blah, blah, blah. So that's how all of this works, right? So input is one of those methods, right? And like I mentioned, method is just a function. What is a function? A function is just a piece of code, small piece of code, right? Right? That does a specific thing, right? Question? Oh, okay. Yeah, please, can you? Yeah.
Okay.
No, AB, the reason I use DuckDuck, I actually use Google, not necessarily DuckDuck, but DuckDuck is just how do you explain that now? I included DuckDuck on Google because DuckDuck kind of protects you from so many of the advertisements and all of that. Look it up. You can actually install it on your Google. It would keep away a lot of the, tracking that happens and a lot of the adverts that pop up and all that. Yeah. So one of those methods you're going to run into is input, and input is really very interesting. And let's see how input works, right? We already know what a variable is. We've created a variable username, is assigned to, now notice this input. What is your name? Input, parentheses, and then inside we have a string, right? Right? And what an input is, right? Input is a type of method that gives you an opportunity, right, to put something into the computer or put something into the program, and you're going to see it now. So username, we already know that this is a variable. We point input, what is your name? Input is essentially trying to have you um sorry. Um Input is essentially trying to collect information from you. So let me run this so that you can see what I mean. So if I run this, it's something like this. Did you notice? The first thing it says, what is your name? Why? Because you said input, what is your name? Okay. So I said, let me say something like Noble, right? And then I press enter, and then it will ask the next question. Now, I'm not going to tell anybody my age. I'll say 100. And then the third one now just prints out that, what is your name? And I say, Noble, how old are you? 100. And then it prints this, nice to meet you, and then it goes, you see the username, which is the variable, it goes to the variable and picks out the name that you have put, and it says you are, then it goes to the variable, picks out that information, and now you've written this intelligent piece of code that can actually accept information from you and then make a comment. Does that make sense? So just look at it and see if you understand what went on there. If you don't understand, let me ask it again. Let me
Could you repeat, please?
yes, ma'am. So um I first of all, I just mentioned that input, right, is a kind of method, right, that you use to get information from the user of your application or your software. Yeah. So essentially, what you're doing is you're asking the user of your application or your software to give you some information. And then you can now use that information to do something, right? So the person that asks the question, what is your name? Hello? Who asked the question?
I When I ask you to repeat something?
Oh, yeah, it's Mary, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So, no, I wanted to show something, right? I'm just repeating what I did before. But so username, right? And I said input and then parentheses, and it's asking me what is your name, right? Okay, let me create another one. User underscore country. So remember, country right now is a variable, right? And then we say equal to, right? Nigeria, I want to believe. And I'll say input open, right? And I say I live. Where do you live? Sorry about that. Where do you live? Right? And then question mark, space, this, and then I cover. So this is a piece of code, right? That can ask the user. Let's say you are the one using this software, right? It can ask you questions, you give it the information, and it will use that information to do something, right? So then I will come here and say print, and I open up this and I say, oh, nice to see that you live in, right? And then I'll give some space and then say user country, user country in user country, and then I close this, right? So notice what's going on. Up to this point, uh, is everybody clear what I'm doing? Because I can go back and explain again. Hmm?
Sir, I am no longer seeing your screen.
Oh,
I
are
don't know
you
if it's
serious?
anyone. Yeah.
I am not sure. Okay, let me stop and share it again because it's showing that it's
I'm
share.
seeing the screen.
Okay, let me
Oh,
just, yeah, let me just go again because seems like. So can you all see the screen now? Can you?
Yeah. Yeah. Yes,
Okay.
sir.
Okay, cool. So look at what's going on. Let me just drop this down, right? We're just saying that, let me take this out. I'm just saying that I can create a variable, right? Username and assign this input to the username. And that input, you can actually use input, this method, to ask someone to give you some data, right? So in this case, I'm trying to find out somebody's name, right? So I create a variable that looks like, so that when someone looks at this, remember I told you you can use anything here, right? I can, when I see something like username, I can know kind of intuitively what it means, right? And I say input. So what I can do is, what question do I want to ask that person so that the person can give me an intelligent answer by asking, putting out that string, the person can understand what I'm talking about. So I decide to put a string here, right? Which says, what is your name? Right? When I say, what is your name? Okay, let me move here so that I can have a blank sheet, right? And I say, what is your name? If I say, what is your name? Right? And then, and I say print, right? And I say something like, um, my name is, and I say username. Remember, everything inside a quotation mark is a string. And I did not want to put this quotation mark over this guy because notice what happens if I put it over it, right? All of a sudden, all of it becomes a string, but that's not what I want. I just want this to be a string. What is? Because this is a variable. Notice, and when you put a variable, all you're trying to do, think of a variable like a box. all you're trying to do is to bring out whatever is inside that box, right? And put it in place of the box, right? So that's why I don't have a quotation mark over it, right? So I'm using input, what is your name, right? And what does input do, right? It helps you gather information from the user of your app or your software. So if I run this right now, right? What am I missing? Invalid syntax. Please, you forgot a comma. What comma did I forget? And it will show you where the comma is supposed to be. The comma is supposed to be here. Wait, is it here or here? Just a minute. No, no, no. Just 1 minute. It's supposed to be here, right? Did you see that? So you see what has just happened, right? User, why is this dialog box opening up and then showing me what is your name? Very simple. It's doing that because I use that input thing here, right? So it's asking me, what is your name? And then I can say Johnson, right? If I say Johnson and then it will, and I say enter, guess what? It now prints out, my name is Johnson. That's what the user input does. Does that make sense? Questions? You all okay? Okay. I will take silence as we are fine. So this is another version of that, right? You have input, what is your name? Then I ask it for something else. So I will collect their name. My plan is also to collect where they live, and then I will ask them for their age, and then I would print out, nice to hear from you, right? Then comma, username. What when I say username, I'm literally trying to pull whatever input this person gave me here. You are, then I put another variable here. I'm literally trying to get how old they are. And then, oh, nice to see that you live in, then another comma here. That would have been an error. And then it will just go collect the user country, right? So if I run this, right, notice what's going to happen. So it's asking me, what is your name? Peter, enter. Where do you live? Ah, I live in Ajegunle. Hmm. Is it Ajegunle? Yeah, that's El Dorado. And then enter. Then it's asking me, how old are you? And I'm like 125 years, right? And then it said, nice to meet you, Peter. You are 125 years old. Oh, nice to see that you live in Ajegunle. Make sense? Questions?
Yeah, makes sense.
Yeah. So gradually, you see how we started from characters and then we're beginning to build up. Then eventually, you're going to get into, control statements like, where the computer begins to, you say, okay, if this happens, do this, or if that happens, do that. And then you begin to create all these branches. So programming is that easy. It's just logical, and you just have to think about it. Have all of the little tools like what I just mentioned right now, and then you can do whatever you want to do. So there's another thing we call string formatting. Do you maybe let's get a 5 minutes break? I'm sorry, I can actually go for hours. Let's get a 5 minutes break and let's come back by 3:40. And then maybe we just do another 20 minutes and we are gone. Okay?
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am. So, the last thing we just finished was using the input method, right, to get user info. The next thing, this is also very important, but you would have already seen a bit of that, is string formatting. String formatting is a bit of it's kind of broad, but I'm going to show you a couple of things, right? So one of those, let's just start with if so remember input, right? So this is our variable favorite hobby equals to input. Anytime you see input, you know that whoever wrote this code, right, wants the user to do something, right? So what is that thing? Inside those parentheses, it says, what's your favorite hobby, right? So I know that if I run this program right now, it's going to ask me that question, and I have to put something in that window or else the program cannot proceed, right? And what it's going to ask me is, what is your hobby? So let me just click, run it. And then it's like, what is your hobby? So I say something like dancing, right? Ooh. And then I press enter, and then it says, wow, Peter, being 125 and loving dancing. This is awesome, right? So what has happened here? But the point is, how do we get this text, right, written out here, right? And the way we get that text written out is very simple. It's through what we call string formatting. First of all, you remember what strings are, right? It's just a bunch of letters put together, concatenated together. So a cat, with quotation marks over it is a string. Um, um, the word is coming to an end, right? With quotation, open and close quotation marks around it is also a string. Like, so anything more than one letter, right, put together with a quotation mark over it is what you call a string. But here we are trying to say that it's possible to format strings. And what do I mean by formatting strings? Notice there's something we call F string, right? And that's where I'm going to go into. You all already have your own Excel sheets. No, what do you call it? You already have your Jupyter notebook, right? If you go click, there's one that says week 1B. Go click week 1B, right? Double click on week 1B, and this is what you see, right? And I'm using this to explain what it means to format, um, to format, just give me a minute. An example is name, print, yeah, yeah, concatenation, format, F strings, and percent style formatting. So let me run this. So there are different kinds of formatting, right? The first one is what we call the F string. And I'm going to, maybe we're not going to finish all of this today, but I will just want to give us a window into this. So the F string, 1 minute. So I'm literally, so the F string, right? And F is short for formatted string literal. That's what F is. It's just a formatted string in Python. And it says an F string, or short for formatted string literal, in Python is a powerful and concise way to embed expressions inside string literals, right? Using curly braces. And I'm going to explain what that means, right? So notice this. Let's say I say something like this. Let me create a cell, right? So I run this cell. If I say something like print, or let me just say, what do I use? Let me say color. Color is equals to, and I say something like blue, right? And I say color is equals to blue. We already know what this is. This is a string and this is a variable, right? Color is equals to string. But I want to print, and I want to print something. I want to say something, right? Um, and I say something like, I open this, right? Now, one way to do this is I can open quotation marks, right? Oh no, that wouldn't be it. And I would start with something like there's something I'm looking for. Okay, let me just use this first. If I say something like this, right, and I open quotation marks, right, then I say, hmm, I have always loved, right? You see what I'm doing there? I've always loved colors, right? And then I close the quotation mark and I say comma, and then I write, sorry, colors, especially the, then, right, comma, and then I say color. Again, from what I said before, right? Why am I not putting the quotation mark after color? Because color is not a string, it's just a variable, right? But I'm trying to say something and I'm putting down this box, right? Think of color like a box. When we run it, right, all that's happening is the program will just open color and bring out whatever is inside color, which is blue, right? So, but then notice what I started with. I started with something called an F, right? And an F is what we call a format, an F string. This is what you call an F string, right? So you start with F, notice print, F, then open quotation mark, my name is, and then inside, right, you go pull name. So that's what I'm trying to do here. So I would say in this particular case, right, I would say I think it's this, and then I would say I've always loved colors, especially the dash um, color. Yeah, I think this is awesome. Please, everybody look at this. Does this make sense? Notice there are two colors there, right? And both of those colors are not the same thing. First of all, I want you to ingest that. In fact, there are multiple colors, right? There is this color here, and there's this color here. But for the F string, notice what I've done. The only thing I've done is that I've opened and closed a parenthesis, right? That's all I have done. And then inside it, I have typed a bunch of words. But because I'm trying to put a variable there, and usually a variable is a container, and we're going to bring out what's inside a container, that's why I put it inside a coily braces. So that's why it says an F string, short for formatted string literal in Python, is a powerful and concise way to embed expressions inside string literals using coily braces, right? So that's what's going on here. Notice what it does, right? I've always loved colors, which is this, especially the dash color. And all I had to do to pull this out is this. Remember the former time we did it, right? All we just did was just write down color. But in this case, right, we're using the F string, right? So I can get this. But I want someone to ask me a question. If you're confused, let me go back and I'll do it again, or I'll do it in another way. So I'm listening.
Okay, I would actually like to know,
Mhm.
okay, in a very simple way, what will you say the F string does for us?
Yeah, in a very simple way, all the F string does, right? It's literally
Yeah.
helps you to format text, right? You can put all kinds of things between strings, pull
Okay.
information out, right? Just like in this particular case, you see color, right? So let's say, let me just change this to, let me say, um, country, right? Equals to Kenya, Kenya, right? And I want to kind of pull out, okay, let me just put all kinds of things here because it will help drive home the point. So full stop. I've always loved colors, especially the color, the dash color, right? The reason, the reason I love, then the next thing I do, right? Guess what? I do coily braces again. You see what's going on there? The reason I love color is because my grandmom in then quotation mark country. Now, let me in I will talk about this. You're not supposed to, there are rules around how long your code should be. I think you can't do more than 83 characters on the same line, and that's why. So I'm going to go this way, right? So the reason I love color is because my grandmom in country, right? Um, in country introduced me to colors early in life. Does that make sense? Just think of it. So all I'm doing, right, is just using coily braces to get information from variables. Does that make sense?
Mhm.
Okay, so think of this, right? Let's say I come in here and I drop this many, many, many times, right? Instead of going in here to go change the color every time, if something changes at this top, right? Let's say color suddenly changes to yellow, right? I don't have to go in here to go change yellow, 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 yellow all over the place. All I need to do is just define my variable here, and then Fstring can help me pull out the color every time I need. So if I run this, oh, what's the error? Gosh, let me see. I've always loved colors, especially the color. What did I miss? I've always loved colors, especially the color, the blue color. Just minute. Let me see what it says. Unterminated F string literal on line 4. Where is my line 4? Oh, 1, 2, 3, 4. So it said I did not terminate my F literal. Let me see what I did not terminate. Wait, first of all, sorry. Let me remove this before, let me get this right first before let me, I think it's probably this is what's causing it. Yes. Okay. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to terminate this and then start a new line. The reason, and then I would print. I'm just trying to show you all something. And then I'm going to, yeah. we have to close this. Yes. Yeah. So the other thing, right? If I want to go to, okay, I'll show that. Let me just take it one step at a time. Invalid syntax. I've always loved, especially the, let me see, what is it that I'm missing? Oh, yeah. No, I don't think that's the problem. Invalid.
The decimal point after the decimal point needs to be after color on line 4.
I
That
was just about to say the same.
I don't, okay. It's
This
supposed
okay,
to tell me what it is.
yeah, your line 4. That I have always loved colors, especially the color that
The
one.
color.
Then
Noble, you have a full stop at the end of the bracket on line 4.
Wait,
yeah,
yeah, wait, let me
yeah,
just
yeah.
get
That's
that up. Okay. Okay, now we got it. So we have this, right? Let me do something else because I'm trying to answer that question, even though it's a very long-winded way of trying to answer it. My friends also, my friend. So let's say I say friend is equals to Jessica, right? My friend also loves the question color, mm, color. Are you with me?
yes,
And I think the reason reason why she loves color is because her first toy was a right. So toy, let's say we define this variable as a color. Um, let's say what toy was that? Let's say, give me an example of a toy. Mm,
Barbie.
uh,
Truck.
Barbie. Yeah, you all are with me. Okay, let's go. So I don't want errors, people. So notice, I've always loved colors, especially the yellow color, right? The reason I love yellow is because my grandmom in Kenya introduced me to colors early in life. My friend Jessica also loves yeah, the yellow color. And I think the reason why she um loves yellow is because her first toy was a yellow Barbie. Make sense? Are we together? You
Yes,
see how that happens, right? So let's assume that I copy this, right? And I make tons of this. Obviously different things, right? But the point is I'm using these same four variables, right? And I'm putting them in different places, right? For the sake of then I have this whole thing. Imagine this is a whole book, right? And I only have these things to play around with, but I'm supposed to insert it in all kinds of places. Now, if something changes, right, and all of a sudden um it's no longer yellow, right? And it's now black. Guess what? If I run this, right? black is now all over the place. Did you notice that? See black, 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 black. But if I didn't have the F string, guess what I would have to do? I would have to go in here and change color everywhere you have color. Does that make sense?
Mhm.
Yeah. So that's one of the reasons why you do that. There are other reasons which I'm going to show us. You see sometimes you see some crazy things. Let me show you an example. We wouldn't do all of that today. So sometimes have you seen something like this where they are typing something like this in a code and you're like, what's going on? Pi dot 2f, or you see something like this. Some crazy things that they are writing quotation. So those are all, you know. So if I want to make something 2 decimal places, 3 decimal places, I can actually just use formatting and just add a line of code. For example, here, right, is saying, you see pi, we know what pi is, right? But guess what? I want it to be 2 decimal places. That's why I just put dot 2f, right? And then it will change it. So notice that pi is 3.14159, right? So, and I'm like, F string, right? Pi rounded to 2 decimal places, blah, 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 is equals to this. So let's go. Let me say, let's round it to 4 decimal places, right? All I need to do is come here and say 4, right? And I run it. Guess what? Oh, sorry, I'm supposed to say 4 here, right? Then 4 rounded to 3 4 pi rounded to 4 decimal places is 3.1416. So how about we just make it, let's round it to 3 decimal places, right? All I need to do is come here, change my 3. This is still constant, right? And I change just this. If I run it, right? Boom. You see how it's building out, right? So those are all things you can do with format, so you can literally, it's like a shorthand for you to do a lot of things and you don't have to replicate them over and over and over again. So there are also a couple of other things. So the point of all of this is when you now get into those codes and we're doing a situation and you see something, because you've seen it before, you know what it is. Even if you don't remember what it is, you have some kind of semblance of what it means, and then you can go to Google or somewhere and just go type that thing and figure out what it is. So I'll give you an example. Remember, we are talking about F strings, right? Let's go to Google, right? Let me say, this thing, calm down. Um, F strings in Python. That's all. And I come here, right? Let me just go open Greeks for Greeks. Python offers a powerful feature called F-strings, formatted string literals to simplify string formatting and interpolation. Then it goes into all kinds of things and begins to show us different kinds of examples. So just like what we did, F, open quotation, val, which is a variable for val is a portal for this, blah, blah, blah. So Greeks, right? And then you see how it put it here. Greeks for Greeks is a portal for Greeks, right? Then we have this name is equals to this, age is equals to this, then F string. Hello, my name is, you go pull name here, and I am, you go pull age here, blah, blah, blah. And then that's how you have this. And then all kinds of things, and it will show you what is going on, and it will give you an example. Show you what's going on, and you give you an example. And like every other language, if you've encountered it like 3 or 4 times, now it becomes something that's not even looking as complicated as it is looking to you today. Make sense? So obviously it's 2 hours, and I know some of you have other plans, right? But what I would encourage us to do is I'm going to stop recording and just offer some remarks.